reason Duke established this initiative was, number one, because there is a strong jazz tradition on campus, and then there's just a lot of other jazz stuff. In addition to the big bands that have been prominent on campus, there's jazz present at Duke in a lot of other ways, like through the center, and through Wednesday night jazz events, through Duke performances, and Aaron Greenwald and the programming that he's doing. A bunch of other academic departments, a bunch of other centers on campus are into jazz, and so, plus our provost loves jazz, so that always helps. The most powerful person on campus is a supporter. So all that kind of came together, and they decided to start the Jazz Archive, but also because there was a recognition that there aren't many of these. In the U.S., I think there are something like 50 libraries, special collections libraries, that have like some jazz-related material, but there's only like 6 or 8 actual jazz archives where there's like staff there to run it. I first started listening to jazz, which I started listening to jazz when I was about 15, because I was studying guitar, and my guitar teacher played jazz, and so I learned jazz almost by default. And I was learning all this stuff, and one day I asked him, like, what album should I start with? I asked the exact same question you just asked, and he said, buy Kind of Blue by Miles Davis, and don't just buy it, but buy it and listen to it. And listen to it until you can sing every tune and every solo, and play every tune and every solo, and you know them all by heart, backwards and forward. And so I thought, wow, that's like a strong statement. And so I did. I went and bought that album and listened to it, and learned how to play it, and did all that. And I was one of, I would guess, 20 million other people who bought that album. It's the highest selling album in the history of jazz. Recorded in 1959 by Miles Davis's first great quintet, kind of +1. There were actually 6 people performing that day. So it was recorded in 59, and the story behind it is essentially that they didn't rehearse for the album, which is pretty consistent throughout Miles Davis's career. He didn't much like to rehearse bands. He liked for them to rehearse on the stage to keep the freshness going, he said. So Miles Davis, had drawn up some charts, kind of outlined some chord progressions, maybe wrote out a couple of melodies, maybe didn't, and just basically passed the stuff out the day of the show, the day of the recording session. They recorded everything. I think had to do a couple of takes on a couple of tunes, but basically recorded it straight through one day, and then it was released about a year later. But it's sold. You won't see it. It sold tons of copies, like literally millions of copies. It is the highest selling album in history of jazz. But you're never going to find it on like a Billboard Top 40 list, because it doesn't sell quickly. Like it doesn't sell like 100,000 copies in a week. It sells 20,000 copies a year for 50 years, or 50,000 a year for 50 years. Mary Lou Williams, in addition to being one of the greatest piano players in the history of jazz, literally, is also one of the greatest arrangers in the history of jazz. And what we were hearing there was a tune that she composed and she arranged, meaning she looked at the ensemble that Andy Kirk was employing, and she wrote parts for each of those people and took a tune and assigned melodies and harmonies and different parts to each of the different musicians and each of the different instruments. So, yeah, 1936.